Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 11, episode 14. I'm here with Quentin Stroud. Arthur has the evening off for pickleball. And we are going to do the topic of, and this is something we haven't done before at all. It's going to be Independent Scientology, why we believe in implants. This should be
This is gonna be good.
a really good one. And this is an extension of the one we did last week on lies. And the only way that you can control someone is to lie to them. So keep that in mind as you listen to this podcast. If you haven't heard that podcast, go back to last week, and I think it's episode 12. Yeah, episode 12, and listen to that one first, and then come back and listen to episode 13, and then listen to this one so that you have the context of the whole thing to our listeners. This is going to be a lot of fun. This will put a lot of pieces together to everybody, and you might want to listen to it a couple of times and go, wait, what did he say in that podcast? I need to listen to that again. I highly recommend
Right.
it. Number of times over equals certainty per LRH. So let's get started.
Well, I also like to state that this is also something that's come up in conversation with people with other PCs, and also in conversation when people were talking about different podcast ideas. So if you guys have any podcast ideas that you want to talk about or you want to delve into, please by all means comment below and let us know, because we would love to open up that conversation if possible.
Yeah, there's always the conundrum of how do we feed the content monster? And for us, a lot of things are obvious. It's like, well, everybody knows that. We don't want to do a podcast on that. That's not, I mean, that's not necessarily the case. That's just our viewpoint. So let us know what you would like to hear us talk about. Put it in the comments on YouTube, and we'll put it on the list of topics to go. We got a couple other ones on deck as well, um, that we'll be doing. So we're trying to bookend this whole concept with this being the sort of third in a series, a loose series. And we'll get it going now with our definition of what an implant is. Take it away, Q.
All right. Well, so first off, I'll say this, that an implant is an electronic means of overwhelming the thetan or the being with a significance. It's an electronic means of overwhelming the thetan with a significance. And so when you're looking at an implant, when we're thinking about an implant, what we're talking about is a way of trying to overwhelm the person, right, with something that has to be significant, has to be regarded, has to have attention on it, right? And when it says electronic, obviously, it's just talking about the energy behind it, the way this thing kind of gets put in. But it's this electronic means of overwhelming the being with a significance. And if you look around life, like just now, if you look around life, you can really spot how these significances are put in on us. And I'll just start with talking about like maybe the news or something. Breaking news, and the music and do, and the things come swiping at you on the TV screen. Oh, this whole production, it's a production, right? And this whole production that gives you this, you need to pay attention to what we're about to say because this is significant, you see. And all of this stuff starts this kind of thing. And now think about that. Now, just that's obviously a very, kind of in your face, real world kind of thing. But think about that on a spiritual level, thinking about that on a level where it now becomes so significant to a being, right? So significant to a being as to create goals, problems, masses, things that really just that have to be there in order for you to think that you're getting somewhere. Think that I can now handle life with this significance. It's so interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned goals, problems, masses. This was something that LRH looked into back in the early to mid 60s, from 61 to 66. And a goals problem or problems mass, or GPM, since we like to abbreviate everything, is where you have a goal and then you have a problem and then you have mass. So if you pictured two fire hoses opposing each other and the big ball of water as the mass in the middle, that is what a GPM is. Now, these goals, problems, masses typically involve, and we've done several podcasts on this, valences, because to have that goals, problems, mass, you have to have agreed that there is a problem that needs a solution. And part of that goals, problems, mass is you being somebody else, the whole package, your mannerisms, the way you talk, the way you think, the way you postulate, everything, being somebody else as a solution that includes the goals, problems, mass. Now, these things get implanted into people on the backtrack and stay there because the person is out of valence. You sort the valence out, you handle the overts and withholds in it, then the person can now be themselves and no longer has that goals, problems, mass. This was simplified in the 70s with the L rundowns, L10, 11, and 12. But
Yes.
at the bottom of this, and Quentin, you know all about this as do I, that the solution to a problem typically creates a further problem. So this is how this goals, problems, mass stacks up on itself as you are somebody else. And this is a form of implantation that causes a person to take on this valence and or to have this goals, problems, mass. Could be one, can come before the other. It doesn't matter. Either way, this is something that the being agreed to, which we talked about in the
Mm-hmm.
last two podcasts.
What I think is amazing about this, and even as you were just talking about it, like, and you think about it, I like how you talk about they have to basically like to assume this beingness. They have to become something other than, right, other than themselves in order to try to solve the problem. And the first thing that comes to my mind is when you think about those two fire hoses, kind of, and the problem is I need to spray this water out to just say put out a fire or whatever case may be. The problem is the fire. The solution would be to spray the water on the fire, right? But then
Right.
if you have this opposing hose spraying water too, because it has to put out the fire too, right? Because they have this counter intention kind of thing going on, and it's spraying the water towards the fire hose that's spraying the water, and now this big uh, 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 this big ball of water is now amassed, coming together, colliding together, right?
Mm-hmm.
This then is the thing that creates the mass that's there. Another thing that comes to mind, if you ever watched Harry Potter, when they would use their wands and shoot power towards each other, and in the middle creates that big old ball of energy, you know, and it explodes and does the whole big old thing. The idea here is that when you are having to take on this other role, you have to become something else in order to survive or in order to make this thing better, to solve this problem, right? You basically put yourself in this state where you have to constantly be something other than self in order to win, in order to live, in order to survive, in order to be, right? You create this other valence. How many times have you felt like this is not me? Like this is not the life I really want for myself. This is not who I choose to be. This is not what I really want to do with my life. This is not what I want in my life. And yet you keep waking up every day when the alarm goes off, right? You keep waking up every day deciding, you decide for yourself that I got to go to work. I got to do this. I got to do that. I had a client of mine who was a very notable client and had to like, and literally would say this, I have to go on stage. I have to do this. I have to do this. And I would say, why do you keep saying that? Because how else am I going to survive? I got mouths to feed. I got mouths to feed, right?
Hmm.
And you could feel the mass. You could feel it just in talking to my client. You could feel the mass that was there, but there was nothing at that time, nothing that could be done to break out of that because I have to survive. You see.
Right.
And so when we talk about implants, we're literally talking about this thing where it is so significant to you that I have to keep focusing my power, my force, my jet of water, my magic from my wand, whatever it is. I have to keep forcing it out, or else I'll, succumb.
Right. And that is an assumed goal. It's an
Mhm.
assumed goal. It doesn't mean that it is the correct goal or the thing, but we're going to get back to implants here in just a second, but it's important to
Mhm.
note that the way a GPM works is who or what would oppose whatever it is that you're being. And this comes down to the law of if you can't beat them, join them. So if you had who or what would oppose a lion tamer, who would be the opposing terminal? A lion.
The lion, right?
That's right. So this goes back and forth, sort of like shoelaces in a tennis shoe, back and forth up this scale, or actually down, where you get further and further and further away because you end up succumbing to the valence that you originally took on to be the solution to the problem that was implanted. Now, we're going to get into the forms of implantation and everything here in a minute. But it's safe to say that these GPMs can be incredibly long, where you started out wanting to be your own goal to be a circus clown. And then who or what would oppose a circus clown? A circus manager or a circus owner or the audience or something like that. And it goes back and forth because if you can't beat them, join them. Now you have another goal and you keep going further and further and further and further away through this labyrinth of terminals and beingnesses and purposes and solutions to problems and everything as your goal, and you lose your way. But at the bottom of that, as far as a GPM is concerned, most of the time, especially on the whole track, there was someone put there to lead you off of the path that you wanted to take of who you really were because they needed you out of the way. In other words, how do you control someone? You lie to them.
You,
Interesting, huh?
yeah. And it's so interesting how when you say they need you out of the way, because it says here, Ellery says in the tech volume on May 8th, 1963, the nature of formation of the GPM, he literally says that, and where is it? Implants result in all variety of illness, apathy, degradation, neurosis, and insanity, and are the principal cause of these in man. And so by putting these things there, these implants, it really is intended to get you out of the way, get you not functional, get you out of the way, get you just kind of walking around in this zombie-like state, if at all, right? In order to get you out of the way so that the one implanting the implants, the one putting it in, can move freely about. And you can see this in life. You can see it in life. You can see it you get this. You can see it in relationships. You can see it in parents. You can see it in so many other things that
Mhm.
it's just to get you out of the way, to shut you up, to sit you down so that you won't be in my way. How
Right.
many times has that ever occurred to you that this is what's happening? It's crazy.
Now this is what's going on now, and this is what's been
Hmm.
going on in this universe for squillions of
I love
Years.
that word.
So how this happened is you have these societies, and they came to realize that back when the physical universe was much younger and I use this all the time with, our public and everything. Have you ever used a chalkboard where, and I think I mentioned this in the podcast a year or two ago, where you have a brand new chalkboard just came right out of the box, and you take that piece of chalk and you hang the chalkboard up on the wall, and you write on the chalkboard and you go, wow, look how brilliant that chalk is on that chalkboard, because all that's there is the slate. There's no residual chalk in the pores of that slate. So the slate picks up the chalk. As you drag it down, friction leaves the chalk on the chalkboard. So what you've got is you've got a clean space, or a metaphor for a physical universe where there hasn't been any other alteration other than the persistence of the universe itself. Okay, that's the chalkboard. And then you go and you mark up the chalkboard with the chalk for the first time. And you're like, wow, this is really vibrant. Look how bold that is. It persists. And you're like, that's brilliant. And if you've ever used a chalkboard that's been around for 20, 30 years, it doesn't hold the chalk very well at all, because it is so used up.
Hmm.
There's no place for the chalk to go into the pores or the molecules between the slate. Now, imagine that as the physical universe way, way, way back on the backtrack. So you've got a universe where there wasn't this create, counter create, create, counter create, create, counter create, counter create going on. You had a clean chalkboard. And these societies said, hey, this is great. But the thing is you were dealing with beings who weren't nearly as aberrated at the time. So you have a lot of people, beings, thetans, different bodies, that type of thing. And they're going around and they're counter postulating these societies, because LRH says the universe is teeming, littered with life. And they're opposed, and this gets back to the GPM, these beings in this society who are counter to the societies, the governments, and things like that, started counter creating against these societies. So these societies said, we got to shut them up. We've got to get them out of the way because they're too powerful. We've got to do something to prevent them from stopping us in achieving our goals. Goals, problems, mass. So these societies said, okay, we got to lie to them somehow. We've got to control them. How do we control them? Wait for it. Pain, drug, hypnosis, or as we say in Scientology, PDHing. So if you use pain,
Hmm.
drug, and hypnosis on a being in order to lie to them, to control them, to tell them that black is white and white is black and love is hate and hate is love, confuses them a little bit. And they start to get distracted and have another goal other than countering the society within which they're living in that they disagree with. Sound familiar? Maybe too familiar?
Like today,
Like,
right?
I don't know, today?
Like any city in the world.
Yeah. This planet, the fourth dynamic at large, how do you control somebody? Well, you lie to them. Then,
Hmm.
okay, so how do you get that lie to stick? Well, you use pain, drugs, hypnosis, especially if they have a body. You can do it to a thetan as well, by throwing them into a body and doing that pain, drug, hypnosis, which it's a lot easier if the body's catatonic and is just being used as a vessel to further implant the thetan, because it's a lot easier because the thetan is connected to it at least briefly. This is going on to this very day on this planet. More on that later. So once you use pain, drug, or hypnosis on the thetan, now they're out of the way. But if you'll recall our podcasts and the tech and the technical volumes, and in your auditing, you know that once an overt is committed on the third or fourth dynamic by these societies, they're going to pull in a motivator. that causes them
Mhm.
to commit another overt. So what happens is these societies folded up in on themselves, but yet left all of these beings under these lies with pain, drug, and hypnosis. And they themselves destroyed themselves for the major third and fourth dynamic overts that they committed, implanting these engrams into these beings, who then carried them forward up to present time, and then were dropped here on this planet. You can believe that if you, it's fine if you don't believe it, but that's the fact of it, really. So you see that here today as well. We'll get into that here in just a second.
Well, I want to say this about that one point, right? That it's interesting because most major world religions have this understanding of this notion that this is not home, right? This is not our home domicile, right? Even when somebody passes away, we call it a homegoing service. At least where I'm from, we call, oh, we having a homegoing service for grandmama. We having a homegoing service, or there's this idea that upon leaving this three-dimensional reality called life, upon leaving this place, that there's a place or there's an experience beyond that is returning to on some level. And so to me, it just kind of makes sense that if this ain't home, if I wasn't supposed to originally be here, why am I here? And if I'm here for a significant reason or for some significance, what got me doing this? Like, what's this all about?
How did I
Uh,
end up here again?
right. How in the world? I thought I made a left when I'm supposed to make a right.
Right.
You know,
I made a wrong turn at Albuquerque.
exactly.
Bugs
You
Bunny
know,
said.
and you end up, yeah, and you end up back in this whole conundrum and trying to figure things out. And what I love about um studying and researching and reading and diving into the tech, what I love about auditing and figuring out things for yourself is what auditing really is, just you kind of taking a look for yourself. You start to see what you never thought you might see. You start to realize or cognite on things that you never thought about until you're in session and you're running these things the way LRH meant to be ran, and you start to see what you never imagined. It's such an interesting journey. You know what I'm saying? And so this is when we talk about implants, and I like how you went into the pain drug hypnosis, because when you even look at um, uh, the rearing and raising of children, right? When you even look at slavery and the way people would deal with enslaved people, the pain that was inflicted, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The pain that was inflicted in order to keep them in line, to keep them, doing what needed to be done for the powers that be or whatever. The pain was significant. Well, now, because obviously you can't just go around beating people with whips. So now they do it with drugs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is basically like a chemical whipping. It's a chemical whipping.
Right.
And
It,
now every time that drug enters your system, it's a lash,
right.
you
It
know?
it it attenuates your awareness and drops you into the blackness of the case, the reactive mind, because you're not in present time. You're re-stimulating earlier incidents, thus disallowing them to be in present time. And once you've got them out of present time, now you can implant them because everything equals everything else.
Yep. A equals A.
Right. So in this society, in our present day society, and we didn't talk about this before we started doing the podcast, because we always go over the material that we're going to talk about before we start the podcast, so we got our homework done. One of the things that it isn't obvious to us, because as people in bodies, you tend to see in the society, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. Okay. But the body operates in an extremely narrow band within the electromagnetic spectrum. We've talked about this many, many, many times before, where there's things going on that your body cannot see because you can only see a very narrow band in the electromagnetic spectrum with a meat body. So there's all this other stuff going on that you're not aware of that you can't see. Now, you may be able to perceive it in other ways other than vision, maybe audio, maybe sensation. I mean, there's 54 different perceptions, but only a handful of those really make the big difference. And then you have the Thetans perceptions as well. And every being on this planet has a varying degree of awareness and perception. And as one gets
Native
auditing,
perceptics.
right, as you get auditing, your perceptics increase exponentially. And you start to become aware of the fact that there's a lot more going on, and this is a pun, but it isn't, than meets the eye. So there, you start to perceive things, you start to know things, you start to get out in front of the physical universe by seconds, minutes, hours, days, and you know that things are going to happen, and sometimes you know what they are way
Hmm.
before it ever shows up in the physical universe. So the point that I'm trying to make is that there's a lot going on in the electromagnetic spectrum in the physical universe, the three-dimensional realm, as you called it a moment ago, that we can't see and we aren't able to perceive. And I'm just gonna say it. Now we've got 5G cell towers, for example.
Right. Oh my
Okay.
gosh. Yeah.
And in your home, they can use that 5G wave and plot out where it is you are in your home, what your body position is, as if it was an actual picture. This is something that is going on at this very moment. That if you have the software to interpret it, you can do with a 5G router or routers in your home, especially if you have a triangulation going on. You have three. We have five here at this house. So that's an example of things you cannot see that do exist, and software can interpolate your position and what you're doing, even what you're saying. Think about
Wow.
that for a moment, okay? Without a microphone.
Just using the positioning and frequency and the movement
That's
and all that
right.
stuff can be all interpreted. Hmm.
That's right. Can be
Yeah.
interpreted.
And I think back on the point of implants, I think this what's really interesting is that when you look at behaviors, and LRH says here that he says, does renting an implant change the PC's pattern of behavior? He says the only troublesome patterns of behavior the PC has reactively are from these implants, and the resurgence and relief is enormous when you rent out these implants. And so when you look at the behavioral patterns, when you look at the way people behave, the way people act, right? And sometimes they'll even say, I don't know what got into me. Or sometimes they'll even say stuff that, that's it just that just wasn't me, or I blacked out, or I just went into this place that I don't even know what happened. You can see these behavioral patterns that show up. And even when I was dealing with this with another client, even when they know what they're doing, but they can't stop themselves.
That's right. That's right.
Like
Because they're
like they
driven.
they, they know. It's been drilled into them. They know what they're doing is harmful to their relationship. They know what they're doing is harmful to their body. They know what they're doing is harmful, and yet they can't stop themselves. These are real world things that we're talking about here. We're not talking about something spooky. Okay. And so when you when you understand the nature of implants and understand why we as independent Scientologists go in to deal with these things, to, as he says, running an implant. When we go in to deal with these things, we're going in to clear that stuff out so that you then have, he says, the resurgence and relief is enormous. Okay. And he says, does this change the definition of clear? No, it clarifies it. Clear could mean a thetan cleared of enforced and unwanted behavior patterns and discomforts. That's what he clarified as a clear in this particular reference. And so as you're looking at this and as you're thinking about your own life, your own experiences, your own the people around you, and even some of your own stuff, as you're thinking about it, when you look at independent Scientology as a way of helping yourself, right, as a part of your personal development, what is it that you might not be aware of that's sticking you in these behavior patterns? What is it that you might not be aware of that has enforced and unwanted behaviors and discomforts? And these are the things that we go looking for and dealing with through independent Scientology.
Right. Now, to get back to how these things occur and how you implant someone, the reason why I brought up the 5G thing is that we have the technology on this planet to direct energy in certain frequencies and in very, very, very specific locations, either geographically on the ground or from the air. I mean, they have direct energy weapons that they can use from satellites. If they can do that with a satellite, they can do that with 5G or other types of the electromagnetic spectrum. So that takes us directly over to pain. Now, when we were talking about this prior to the podcast, Quentin was talking about shock therapy that psychiatrists use. That is a very, very archaic means of causing pain electronically. Now,
Mhm.
they were doing this, back in the 50s all the way up to present. That's one way. But the other ways could be far more technological in their production and means to convey energy in
Yes.
order to get a desired result. If you could direct a beam of energy or you could direct a wave of energy and propagate it from a tower, let's just say to the masses, all you have to do is send that wave out to get a desired result in people. They've done experiments on this and it is factual. This isn't science fiction. Okay,
Right.
that's pain. Okay, now we'll leave it at that and we won't get into all of the, background information on this. You know what Google is, you know what Yahoo is, you know what DuckDuckGo is. Look it up. Now, drugs and hypnosis. These are the lower bands on how you can get somebody implanted with a particular concept slash valence and re-stimulate an earlier valence. The valence is already there. Okay. You've been lots and lots and lots of people that all have their varying waves, if you will, as far as what it takes to trigger that valence or re-stimulate that valence. Drugs and hypnosis. Look at our society. How prevalent, and
Yeah.
it is daunting, and it takes a hell of a lot of confront to look at the fact that, forget COVID, the bigger pandemic is drug use and pharmaceuticals. And when you take these drugs, what you're doing is you're attenuating the person, the thetan in charge, vis-a-vis the body, the brain connected to the thetan. Okay, you're attenuating their awareness. You're lowering their awareness. And I'm just gonna say this because it's the truth. You're lowering their frequency. Okay, the tone scale.
Yes.
You're lowering
Yep.
them on the tone scale to the point that they accept commands. Okay, with drugs. This is how governments implant people. This is how you get a Manchurian candidate. Look it up. It's a 1960s movie with one of the most popular crooners of all time. I won't say his name, but look it up. And he's the main character in this movie called The Manchurian Candidate. They made a version of it in the 1990s with Denzel
Yes,
Washington.
that was so good.
Great, great movie. The original is even better. But this is how you create a Manchurian candidate is you implant them with a goal. Okay? Now, let's just for a moment say this goal would be to kill a US president. That is an implant. This is how this planet works. Is
Mhm.
is you get somebody implanted with a goal, make them the assassin, they become the patsy. You get rid of the so-called assassin so there's no trail back to you, and then you're free and clear. Now, this is how this planet operates, okay? In this case, I can't tell you what Lee Harvey Oswald how they PDH'd him, but I guarantee you that they did, okay? Because all beings
Mhm.
are basically good. And another good movie to watch is JFK by Oliver Stone. Watch that
Mhm.
movie, and it's a long one, but it's some of the best acting, the best portrayal of that particular incident with John Kennedy I've ever seen. Now, granted, they took literary license with it and everything like that. But the point being is, with pain drug hypnosis, you can get anybody to do anything you want them to if you put in enough force. Okay, if you remember back in Dianetics, book one, Ellerich talked a lot about what it was that you said when a person was experiencing an engram. Don't talk, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk. Don't say anything because that becomes part of the engram. Yes, yes, that is true. But LRH later iterates. He says it's not what's said in the engram, but the force. The force is what sticks the thetan. Here's why. And I'm not going to give the name of the reference, but I'm going to give you some of the information. We talked about this before the podcast. What you're running into is a thetan wants to hold their ability in space. That is the definition of OT. Power is the ability to hold a position in space. This
Mission in space. That's right.
right. This works against the thetan because when you start opposing force and somebody says, Johnny, get in your room. You're grounded without dinner. What happens to Johnny? He resists. Okay. Now you have an engram. That is why engrams persist, is because you have this, wait for it, force, counter, force. It isn't the contents of the engram that is aberrative to the being. It is the fact that they are holding that image there to hold their position in space. Plain and simple. And they're keeping that picture there as a reminder. They're putting the picture on
Beautiful.
the satanic wall. Look at this picture. Look at this picture. Look at this picture. Remember what happened. Remember what happened. Danger, danger, danger. Look at this picture. Holding my
Mhm.
position. Holding my position. Okay. That's why engrams stick in the reactive mind, is because the thetan is the one putting it there.
Keeping
Remember
it
what
there.
happened. Remember what happened. This is what
Right.
causes PTSD. Same
Yep.
thing. Same thing.
Never forget this. Never forget this. Never forget this.
That's right. And he also goes on to say that it isn't the implant that is so aberrative to the thetan. It is the fact of what we just described. Hold the position, hold the position, hold the position, hold the position, mock it up, mock it up, mock it up. How about that?
Mm.
That's how you create, if you know what you're doing, how you can create an implant is you put something there
Mhm.
and try to push the thetan off of that position, that post, that base, whatever it is, wherever they're at as a being, they're going to hold it and resist. That is goals, problems, mass. As simply put as
Mhm.
we can put it. All because of pain, drugs, hypnosis. And it takes a body, for the most part, to get this sort of thing to stick. But you can do it to a phaeton as well with energy. But on this planet,
Right.
drugs stick a person because what's happening there? The Thetan wants to be in present time. The drugs say, no, 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 no. We're going to restimulate you, and it's going to be through the body. And now you feel this euphoria. You're being pushed off of wanting to be in present time, trying to hold your position, and the drugs are dragging you back down the track. That's how drugs do it. Now let's get into hypnosis. If you remember Goebbels from the Nazis in Germany in World War II, what he said is true, is if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. Now, you take that in conjunction with pain and drugs, okay? Everybody on this planet is chasing the dollar. Why? Because it's made that way on purpose. You can't hold you're trying to hold your position. You're trying to hold your position. You're trying to hold your position. You're being pushed off of it. I'm running out of money. I'm running out of money. I need more money. I have to handle this. This is a present time problem. It's an ARC break. You commit overts in order to survive. It's a solution to a problem. And you're doing that because you're out of valence already.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the conundrum. So you're already attenuated with the reactive mind, or you're already attenuated with a composite case that is driving you in a particular direction other than the direction that you want to go in. This is what auditing handles. So
And so this whole idea. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
the hypnosis comes in the form of, simply put, you listen to the radio station. How many times have you heard a song on the radio? Over and over and over and over and over and over. Repeat, 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 repeat. Learn the lesson, learn the lesson. Learn the prediction. What's the rhythm? What do the lyrics say? The lyrics are restimulative. The lyrics are put there to restimulate you. The beat is put there to restimulate you. Remember, we talked about this in the last podcast, 120 beats per minute, because that is what people can have because where they're at as a case. That's the only thing that they can accept. That's the only acceptable randomity between 40 and 240 beats per minute. 120 beats is where? Smack dab at center. Smack dab at
Mm-hmm.
center. So if you speed it, what happens when you hear a song that's slower? Especially if it's in a minor key, it makes you sad. If it's in a major key, it makes you feel happy. Okay, because those are varying degrees of ARC on the tone scale. Okay, so if you're already attenuated because of everything that's going on in life, you're trying to survive and it's so freaking difficult. Why is everything so hard? Because it's created that way. Because everything was easy and nobody was wanting for everything and everyone had a home and they had food and they were able to survive, where would things be? They wouldn't be able to control you. So they have to create it so that you're constantly chasing after something that isn't what makes you happy. Money doesn't make you happy. It may solve a problem. The only thing that makes you happy is if you are ethical and you are being yourself. Otherwise,
That's right.
you pose problems that then create further problems as a solution to survival because you're being somebody else. You're out of valence. And that is because you are chasing implanted goals other than those that are yours when you are yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mic drop. Pain, drug, hypnosis. Repeat, 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 repeat. That is, and I'm just using this as an analog for it with music. Forget about what's on your phone, what's on social media, what's on the on television, what's on YouTube. It doesn't matter. I mean, television anymore, the line isn't even blurred. They're all one and the same. So
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis is the number of times that you repeat it, as long as you're attenuated and you're not fully in present time because you're being bombarded with all of this restimulation that restimulates these goals, valences, and earlier implants. This is why it is so important to get auditing and unravel this Gordian knot. It's a famous knot in history that Alexander the Great solve the solution of. So the story went, he who could unwind this big knot of rope would rule the world. And Alexander walked up to it and slashed it in half with his sword and became ruler of the known world. This is what auditing does for a being.
That's brilliant.
So here we
Hmm.
are. This is how this whole thing works. And we didn't mention a whole lot about overts and withholds and everything like that, but that's a big part of it. But the thing is goals, problems, mass come about through implantation of false goals. Otherwise, there's no problem there. It's the Thetan that is trying to hold their position in space and being pushed off of it by a false goal, being lied to in order to be controlled, and agreeing with that lie that causes them to go into that labyrinth from which they may never return on the whole track unless they get audited.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's interesting because when we look at our own lives and we look at the things that we are pursuing, the things that we go after with such fervor, and one might say, well, that's just me, right? That's just me. I mean, I'm gonna chase my bag. I'm gonna chase that money. I'm gonna get my paper. That's just me. That's just the kind of person I am. And you ask yourself, or one might say to themselves, why is that just you? Like, why is that just you? Even when it comes to relationship, right? That there is this whole idea that exists somewhere, somehow, that that I have to be in this. I have to do this or I have to do that, right? These are things that you want to take a look at, or that you might come to discover for yourself, where they really come from, where they could come from. LRH has here, in the same reference, about heartbreak. It's interesting. And he says one's first reaction to this news may be one of heartbreak, feeling betrayed, etc. I felt the same way when I found it out. Then I realized the emotion came out of the implants themselves. One is supposed to feel, he has it in italics, one is supposed to feel disheartened and betrayed when he or she realizes it. That keeps it from being undone. It leaves the being trapped. We just said this, right? It leaves the being trapped. The reaction is just part of the trap. Before I realized this, I only waited a day or two to be sure. I have always persevered. Sorry, I've always persevered in my honesty with you and have given you a vital research datum as fast as I knew it, regardless of its palpability. This is one of those times. And I'm telling you guys this, that if you're hearing this conversation and we're talking about implants, or we're talking about these things that might not really be you, and you're going after them and you're chasing after them and doing all this other stuff or whatever, and if you feel disheartened, if you feel betrayed, if you feel the feeling of that and what that could represent, it says here when it's supposed to feel that way, because that is what keeps it from being undone. That's what keeps you from wanting to go up the bridge. That's
Mhm.
what keeps you from wanting to get in session and deal with these things, because oh gosh, it's so tragic, it's so disheartening, it's so heavy, it's so much. That anxiety, that PTSD, that those feelings that to try to keep it in there, right? And so even LRH felt that way. And yet he had to persevere in his honesty and giving this to us, this datum, this research datum, because once we know what we're dealing with here and we know what we're dealing with and we know how to deal with them, it takes a high level of confront to be able to sit in the chair, get on the cans, and get in session. And the beautiful thing about here at ALGP is that we do it remotely. So you can hold your position in space as a thing right in your own home. And you can sit down and begin a session. And we get in and we start going after the things that need to come up and need to get out of there. So I think this is a really good conversation. I hope you understand after this conversation why we as independent Scientologists believe, and I'm putting that in quotations now, why we believe in implants and what this whole thing could represent. And so I say take a look for yourself,
Yeah, and
period.
it's important to note and say, and I probably should have put this at the beginning of the podcast because some of this stuff isn't real to a lot of our listeners, is if it's
Hmm.
true for you, it's true for you. Okay. And what your reality is now is what your reality is. But I guarantee you that if you're honest with yourself and you get in the chair and you get some auditing, you get some training, you'll start to see that there are truths there that were heretofore uninspected. And your awareness starts to come up and your truth starts to change. And truth is only as palpable as you are aware of it, which LRH mentioned in the quote that Quentin just spoke about.
Hmm.
So you don't know what you don't know. And the definition of the word Scientology is knowing how to know. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's important to note that this is not us telling you what you should believe, right? Or how you should govern yourself accordingly. But what it is saying is that if you take a look for yourself and see if there is something to this, if there is something there, if there is something that you might need to handle in session, this is where it could be done, and this is where you have somebody who is expertly trained and cares enough. I think that's important to say too. Somebody who is trained enough and cares enough to do this with you.
right.
He says in another reference, 27 May 19, he said, "Lucky is the PC whose auditor has understood this bulletin, and lucky is the auditor made his own case run well." And so lucky is the PC who has an auditor who understands this stuff. Okay.
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to. And you won't know if you don't try. Things don't change unless you change them. And this is how we change them is with this information and the application of this information standardly, correctly, appropriately in time on a gradient. And that's how auditing works is little steps at a time, a little bit bigger steps at a time. And your awareness comes up, your confront comes up, and you're like, damn, I feel great. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden, your reality, your truths change because you see things from a different perspective than you did before. And at some point, you will be in, well, it's a misnomer to say that you will be in your own valence. You are just you. A valence is something other than who you are. And that's what implantation has done to every single being in this sector of the galaxy at a minimum per LRH. And I agree with that statement and I stand behind it. So does Quentin.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
avail yourself of this technology. Contact us 816 355 4606 in the United States. So, yeah, and we have other packages that we're going to be releasing this month. The 50% off bridge package special ended yesterday, but contact us for details on what we're going to be doing for the month of July 2025. So, for Quentin and myself, Uh, I think this has been a very illuminating explanation of some very complex concepts. And we've tried to distill it down as best we could through analogies to get it across to you guys as our listeners. And we want you to know that we appreciate you for listening and listening to these
Hmm.
podcasts, podcast after podcast, week after week, month after month, year after year. We're here for you. We want to help you help yourself. Namaste, and we love you. Bye bye.
Peace.